Vayichan sham Yisroel neged ha'har kulanu ke'echad.
We have the honor of interviewing Rav Yisroel and Mrs. Elisheva Kaminetsky, who share the unique attributes that both principals of both a boys and a girls high school. So certainly superior and experienced mechanchim by any measure. Welcome, Rabbi and Mrs. Kaminetsky.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be here.
So how would you define what is chinuch? There's no word for it in English, by the way.
Rashi in Chumash says that chinuch is lashon hascholas knisas ha'adam, the beginning of training a person to be in a certain way. And I think it's interesting that the Torah phrases the mitzvah of teaching Torah v'shinantam l'fanecha, that a person is supposed to teach his children. So of course Chazal have said Elu Talmidecha, but the pasuk also means its simple explanation, which is that parents have an obligation to teach children. So teachers have an obligation to teach students, parents have an obligation to teach children, but it's to model, it's to train, it's to develop, and a person should do their best to try to do what they can to ensure that their children will follow the Derech HaTorah. This is the sacred responsibility of parents. Sometimes if they send the kid to a yeshiva or a school, so then they'll share that obligation with the teachers, with the yeshiva. But parents have an obligation to do what they can to pass on the Masorah. This is the most important and sacred role that a parent has, is to do what they can to give over the Masorah of our traditions, halacha, hashkafa, the Masorah of what being a Jew is to their children.
And when I ask your wife, what would you consider successful chinuch?
So it's a great question, and of course, when we're dealing with anything that we're describing as success for people, it's going to vary from person to person. There's not one product, one standard. But I actually think that successful chinuch is when our children and our students can stand on their own. Emidu talmidem harbe, that you are able to allow them to stand and establish for themselves and to function independently. I've often remarked that, when people talk about having nachas from your children, for years I didn't really know what that meant. And I felt a little inferior, honestly. Like, am I not overflowing with nachas that my son laned at his bar mitzvah? Well, he sat down, and thank God I am grateful to the Ribbono Shel Olam that he was able to learn well from his father who taught him, but he did what he was supposed to do. It didn't feel like an overwhelming feeling of nachas. To me, nachas is actually when you see your children functioning independently in the ways that you have taught and the values that you have instilled within them. So whatever that variable is, whatever your values are, of course, Torah values are of paramount importance in chinuch, but when our children function independently of us, not because we told them to make your bed or to say thank you or to help the lady with her packages, to me, that is the gold standard of successful chinuch for teachers and parents.
And can I just tell too, my father used to say, all of Kriya Shema, when it talks about giving over to our children, is Lashon Rabin. Chsaftem v'dibart about b'shifta, but then suddenly it goes to a Lashon Yachid. B'shiftecha b'veisecha u'belechtecha b'derech. He said, everything's Lashon Rabin, but when you were successful? When they do it individually on their own.
And I would add, once you're talking about Kriya Shema, I would add also one of my favorite ideas on this very point is in the first paragraph of Shema. It says, "V'shinantam lalecha v'dibarta bam," you shall speak. In the second paragraph, Shema says, "V'limadtem osam es b'neichem ledaber bam." If you learn with the child, you'll get the child to speak. Ledaber bam. So in the beginning, when a child is young, you may have to teach him the basics, but the goal as chinuch continues is not v'shinantam lalecha v'dibarta, that you, the father, you, the Rebbe, is speaking, but v'limadtem osam es b'neichem ledaber bam. When you learn with the child and make the child part of the learning process, empower them to be part of the learning, you get them to speak in the learning, that's the ultimate goal of chinuch.
So now people are in a sort of an unprecedented situation where parents are home with their children. If you're in quarantine now or social distancing for practically 2 months, and very possibly, certainly till the end of the school year, maybe for another year if they don't come out with a vaccine. We just don't know. So parents have never spent this much time with their children. So talk to me. I'm sure you get a lot of calls. What are some of the challenges people are facing? And what are some of the solutions?
I think that there are many, many challenges. There's challenges in relationships between the members of a family that are quarantined together, or in certainly in a stay-at-home mode. Those challenges can be just drawing boundaries between the work and family, divide. Nobody has that commute to work anymore that helps them transition from being mother to professional, father to professional kind of a thing. And I think many people are struggling with those boundaries. The work days are just extending beyond into family family needs are extending into the workday. So I think that that's something to be acknowledged and to be mindful of, and to think as a family and to think as individuals and professionals about how to draw those clear boundaries. Because if we don't make them, the demarcations do not exist naturally. I also think that we have to understand that we are spending a lot of time with each other, and we can have a beautiful, beautiful, wholesome family dynamic. And obviously there's some who have a more strained dynamic, but it's important to acknowledge that even when things are great, the fact that we are together with the same people over and over again, those little cracks, those little irritations, whether it's that people aren't cleaning up after themselves or personal space is being invaded, can become so much more exaggerated. And clear communication about those things. One of my children actually, recently shared, I thrive when there are clear expectations of me. It was a young adult child, but I thought it was such an interesting observation. I think that's true of all of us, actually. And spelling out the clear expectations for how a home is run and for what each person's responsibilities and needs are, I think are very, very important in a family spending this time together. Additionally, engaging in family...
Can I slow you down?
Absolutely.
What you said we should make boundaries. How would we, between time and work, how do we practically do that? Like, what would it mean?
So I think we've spoken about, as a community, these things before, but I think they're that much more important now. Bringing a cell phone to the dinner table, continuing to answer emails, closing the computer. This is my work area, and from these hours, it's as if mommy, daddy are at work, and you have your school responsibilities. Just physically even, closing a door, closing a laptop, turning off a cell phone, and giving full undivided attention in both directions, and explaining the need, whether it's to the professional world. I understand that we're in quarantine, and I'm going to get back to you, but these are times where I need to be with my family. I know that when the teachers in my school, share that with me, it's so much easier for me to honor their space. Great. I respect that, and I like hearing that directly. And now let's try to work out how we can still get what we need to get done professionally and allow that to be. But
as Jews, can I say, and as Jews, this is particularly, we have a role model for this, because the concept of Shabbos is like, boom. It's like, people ask me, how do you not answer your cell phone, check your emails for 25 hours? And the word Shavas, like the Medrash says, in 1 second, it just stopped. Shavas. Like Yechut HaSayre, the Baruch Shem was mitzamtzem. So we practically, more than any people in the universe, have that ability. Work is now over. Boom, I'm with the family.
Right.
And you also said setting out clear responsibilities. How do we do that without children feel like they're in some type of prison environment. Like, this is what you have to do. I mean,
Right.
that's, I know I have kids, and it's not easy for me to tell them what to do.
I think and I'll borrow this from a phrase that is being used quite a bit. We're all in this together is key, psychologically, emotionally, and practically. One of the things that we've done in our home is we set a time on Erev Shabbos where the entire family is doing Erev Shabbos preparations. This is post-COVID. This is not the way our home ran prior to that. But we literally put on the family WhatsApp chat, 2:30 Erev Shabbos, Kaminetsky Erev Shabbos family preparations. Something which I have found to be really helpful. I did this a few years ago on Erev Pesach, and I've started doing it again now on Erev Shabbos. Is I simply take all of the things that need to be done, and I put them on a different Post-it note, and I plaster one cabinet in my kitchen with Post-it notes. My children are not. My youngest child is 13. So we're talking about teenagers and young adults in the house. But I think this can be done with younger kids as well. And it's everybody just comes over and takes a Post-it note. First come, first serve. So if you want set the table, get there early. You'll set the table, and somebody else will have take out the garbage. But it's not me barking the orders. Maishi, you got to do this. We're all in this together. We're all in Erev Shabbos mode. Everybody's going over to take a Post-it note or a job off the list or a note out of the cookie jar.
Fabulous. That's fabulous.
And guess what? In an hour, and the same thing's true right after Shabbos. And it wasn't always like this. Sometimes things would wait for the cleaning lady to come, after Shabbos, a day or two later to happen in our home. But now it's after Shabbos, a half hour. We're all in this together. Setting that time, and it's not, I'm your slave or you're making me do this. No. This is our home. We're all in this together. Interesting, I've even found that my children sometimes contribute things that need to be done. Ma, I really think we probably should vacuum the steps this week.
So, Rabbi, let me ask you a tough question that I've gotten from parents. It's a hard slider over the middle, right? What happens when you have children that don't respect social distancing, especially teenagers, and they just want to be with their friends, and by doing that, they're really putting family members at risk? How do we, how do we deal with it? And teenagers can be tough, right?
That's all I've done for the last 28 years is deal with teenagers. It's a very, very good question. I think generally speaking, and this, what I'll answer, I think has to do in general with getting teenagers to do things that you don't want them to do all the time. And there may be a difference between a teenager who's 16, 17 versus 12, 13. That could be somewhat different. But rule number one with teenagers is whatever you would like them to do, you have to do yourself. That's the first thing. I'm sure that this, and in this particular example you gave, that's probably not such a major issue, but, I'm sure people always worry about, how do I get my kid to daven? How do I get my kid to learn? How do I get my kid? So rule number one of that is that the best thing that a parent could do to get their child to daven or to learn is the way they daven themselves. That will be the biggest thing that a parent can do. Maybe the place that a parent chooses to daven, the type of minyan that a parent decides to daven in, and the way a parent conducts himself during davening. Even if the child is not standing next to the parent at davening, somehow the kid always knows how the father, he knows. He doesn't have to even be there. He knows without knowing somehow. It's the sixth sense that the kids have. I like to sometimes say that all the problems in me, all my problems, my kids somehow figure out a way to multiply them times 100 or 1,000. It's just the way the kids are. It's the sixth sense that they have. Learning as well. A parent will come to me and say, how do I get my kid to learn? My kid's not opening up a sefer. He doesn't want, So my first question, when I was younger, I probably wouldn't have the chutzpah to say this, but now that I've been doing it for 28 years, I might say, does your kid ever see you opening up a sefer? Does your kid ever, how long does the child, so now in these areas, anytime you want to get a teenager, so what I would do in a case like this is sit down and explain to the child and say, listen, it's my job as your parent. I've been around the block a little bit more than you have. So it's my job to try to take care of your safety and the safety of the members of our family. I just want to explain to you exactly why this is a challenge. And this is an expectation I have of you. at a certain age, you're not going to be able to force the child to do X, Y, and Z. You're not going to be able to force them. But you do, as a parent, need to clearly communicate and explain to them the dangers involved and what they're doing. And I find that in 9 out of 10 times, even if the child won't act at that moment, the lesson, if it's done with love and care and understanding, and not like you must do this, but like, hey, we're in this. Like Elisheva said, we're in this together. All of Klal Yisrael, all of humanity is actually in this together. What an incredible! I mean, I think at a time like this, actually, where they see the whole world literally shut down, it's so unprecedented that it's a little bit more ripe. I've found that the teenagers are generally more. And again, if they're going to ride together and stay 6 feet apart, but that kind of a thing. I'm not sure this is the time to be makpid on that issue. People are walking outside; they take walks. But I think that when I was growing up, so sometimes our generation, so our parents said, when we'd ask our parents why, they'd say, because I said so. I don't think because I said so works anymore today. Today, because I said so doesn't work anymore. Maybe it did work 30, 50 years ago. I don't know if it did or it didn't. I think my suspicion is from people I've spoken to of the generation before me, it did used to work in the 30s, 40s, 50s. That the respect for parents was maybe at a different level. I have a whole nother shtickle Torah about why respect for parents is so weak now. I once heard a beautiful idea about why in the last 40, 50 years, respect for parents has been so weak in general. Once heard from Rav Yisroel said a beautiful idea that the whole secret to Mashiach coming is when the older generation is going to learn how to successfully transmit the Masorah to the next generation. Right? V'hu ha'ketz, there's even a Mishnah Erechim that says like that. Ha'av morish lebeno, the father gives over to children so many different attributes and qualities. V'hu ha'ketz, the Mishnah says. One could understand Mishnah to mean is that when a father will finally figure out how to give over everything properly to the child, that's going to be the secret of Mashiach. So the Satan knows, as we get closer to Mashiach, or Ram says that the Satan knows that the relationship between parent and child is such an important thing for the secret of Mashiach to come that he's working extra hard that the kids shouldn't respect the parents now. But at any rate, it's got to be just because my parents said so won't go in today's generation. They're learning everything on the internet. They're exploring. They're doing so many things. They know so much. It's not going to work. It's got to be explanation. Let's sit down. There's a virus. There's an illness going on here. It's a very dangerous time. We haven't davened in shul in months. It's a serious issue. And the child said, listen, given something, say, okay, you want to ride a bike and stay 10 feet away, whatever it is, that's okay. We have, sometimes our daughter's friends will show up on a Shabbos. They stay 10, they don't come into the house. They stay 10 feet away in the backyard. And we're not going to you can't go too crazy, especially on the teenagers. Within moderation, with explanation, within reason, I think you have the best shot of the kid doing the most that they can do.
I mean, I would just say, you say, when did this start? I think the Gemara in my Cotton says that, the Gemara says that Amsa the Rebbe, Chazise lehu gavre dahavi mochi bebnei agadol. V'yamru lahavi b'shamta. She saw somebody really severely disciplining an older child, and he said this person should be in nida because the child will just clearly strike back. I think this issue is really. I would ask you, my feeling is, and this is prejudice, that perhaps the single largest challenge for our generation is the internet with children, right? Internet addiction, game. I mean, I remember when I was a young boy, even when I would pick up a stickball to go out, my father would say, put it down, learn Nachablat Gemara. But today, the kids so I'm going to ask like a two-pronged question. We have a danger now with the Zoom classrooms, which Lakewood has come out against, and they're saying, look, we don't want to teach kids, especially from a young age, that the tablet has become their god. And once they start with Zoom, the next thing is Pac-Man. I'm probably dating myself. And the next thing is Fortnite. Okay, that's much more relevant, And the next thing is, and then obviously with kfira and pornography, depending on the age, right? So we have now taken this scourge of really all of, it's not just Klal Yisrael who's, used to having a concept of Migdash Ma'at and a Mishkan. But I mean, people as far away as the fellow from Facebook, Zuckerberg, said he would not give his child Facebook before the age of 13 or 14. And now we've taken this thing and put it right in front of our 5-year-olds. I mean, the Rosh Yeshivas of Lakewood, right? I mean, is the cure greater than the disease, more dangerous than the disease? And so I'm asking double prime, what are we doing now? Are we bringing an enemy into the home? Is it imay babayis? And in general, as two mechanchim of teenagers in an open community, how do we deal with this? I mean, when we were young, the kids really, I think, every generation says that, but the kids were holier. How do we deal with that today? So I'm asking a double prime question.
I go back to what I said before. Again, this is our view, and we don't mean to say that our view is necessarily authoritative. You know, we're here. We're going to tell you our opinion. You know, that's our opinion is just backed up of, you know, like I said, 30 years of dealing with teenagers. That's all we have. I always tell people I'm not an expert in anything. I'm not an expert in anything. Taisvis, I happen to be a Rebbe. I teach a little bit, but I'm not an expert. I teach. I give a shiur. I've been giving a shiur for a long time. I give a daf yomi shiur. I give a daily shiur. But I'm not an expert. The only one thing that I'm a little bit know something about is the mind of a high school boy. I don't know elementary school. I don't know girls. That's my wife. But that's one thing I know about. And the only reason I know is because all I've been doing for 30 years is dealing with high school boys. And I go back to what I said before, and two things that I said before to address this question. The first is modeling, and I would assume that most of the parents, for work or for otherwise, are exposed to the internet nowadays. It's very, very difficult to function. There are some homes that actually zero internet, and even some homes, as you've said, have introduced the internet just because of this particular issue. We have rabbeim in our yeshiva who don't have any internet in their homes at all, but now they had to get something, or they got an iPad or something that at least allows them to teach their own talmidim. So I go back to two things I said before, and that is that, alcohol, any kind of vice, it's the same thing. My view is that when it's so out there, completely forbidding it will be counterproductive, and we need to teach moderation. We need to teach how to use it the right way. And that starts with parents. That's the other thing about modeling. The internet can be a tool that could be something very positive, and it's also something very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. I don't mean to understate the danger. But our view is it's already so pervasive that to teach the kids that it's us or us or us, or you can't have it anyway, even without this particular issue, that's not really our philosophy in general. It's actually more to teach, yes, there are parts of this that are usher, so you need to learn how to discern what's usher and what's mutter. Just like alcohol could be a vice and it could become an addiction, and internet could become an addiction, anything can come, food. Eating food can become an addiction. How do we teach our kids how to eat healthy food? It's by modeling and by teaching them that there are certain foods. Maybe you want to have a little bit over here like this, and a little bit, want to have a little ice cream sometime, but you can't just eat that all the time because it's bad for you. And anything, in my view, almost anything can become an addiction if it's not properly channeled. And the goal of Yiddishkeit is Kedoshim Tiyu, is to teach a person how to discern, how to say this is okay, that, and it's a lifelong struggle. And it's a lifelong struggle for adults. And if we be honest with ourselves, the adults who name all the Gedolim, it's not like the Gedolim struggle with these things too. That's part of the human condition, struggling with the Yetzer Hara. And I feel like and I believe that Rav Yisroel Kaminetsky, I know out here Yeshivat Torah, got a psak from Shloime Dachs, not only that they're allowed to use Zoom, that they have to use Zoom. Again, I know Lakewood said, I'm not coming to decide between the Gedolim, but there are different views of this, as you pointed out. And our view is that if there's a tool that could have the child look at his Rebbe and he could learn Torah better, and we have to explain, the internet has to be in a public area in the house, and you can't give the kid a cell phone at an early age because, that's going to be too much. So you have to learn how to do it in Bahadраga in a way that the child will learn how to use it for the right things. But I think my wife has what to say on that.
So, Rebbe, so let me just add on to that. Then, following your husband's direction, a chiddush has come to me that if chinuch is about modeling, if parents are constantly on their email, constantly on the internet, constantly checking the news, constantly on their phone, they are teaching their children that this is appropriate behavior, and there's a new master in the house, and it's called the internet.
Correct.
So we have to practice restraint as adults for the children to recognize that this monster has to be kept at bay or in boundaries.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, that's the boundary. Another take off on the concept that I said a few minutes ago about boundaries in general. But, coupled with what my husband's been stressing about modeling, I think that that's really important. I do want to just add one other point. I think that, one of the big challenges, all of the different things that are going around, the different memes and different, about parents now becoming teachers in the home. And, I think a lot of that has to do with, needing to help reteach the math because it wasn't so clear, in the phone conference or on the Zoom or whatever. I think there's something much deeper here that's going on in this time. And that is that we've had the luxury as parents of, may I say, almost abdicating at times, and that's been a mistake pre-COVID, the chinuch of our children to the schools. We obviously partnered together with schools, and Baruch Hashem, we have some unbelievable schools, in all of our communities that have done a phenomenal job of really being mechanech the next generation. But I know that our Rabbi Mordechai Willig, has always, told us as parents that the main chinuch for children, even when schools are up and running, the most influential people in children's lives, with the most amazing mechanchim in our unbelievable mosdos, are the parents, largely because of what my husband's been saying about the modeling that they see from their parents 24/7. So what you're saying is very, very true. But it's not just that now parents are teachers because they have to set the limits and be the filters, and certainly not just that they may have to reteach the math, etc. We also have an incredible opportunity in the language that we use with our children. So yes, if we are giving a young child a tablet, there has to be filters for all of the inappropriate things that we don't want them to be exposed to. And Baruch Hashem, those things exist. There also has to be time limits. You have this now, and as my husband said before, I think explaining things to kids is so important. This is something that we have now because you don't have the schus of being able to go to school and sit in front of your Rebbe or your Mora. So in the interim, we're using this for this explicit purpose. That makes sense to kids. That doesn't mean that they won't experiment or try. And I think it's important for parents to realize that there aren't just filters for content, but there are time settings on almost any device. And certainly one shouldn't be bringing a device into their home that doesn't have that kind of parent control. And to me, it's an important thing to consider, not just the content that they're being exposed to, but the amount of time that they can access the tablet. That's in our control. We have the ability to set those limits. And just piggybacking on what you asked me before, it doesn't have to be with put that away, put that away. It shuts off. After 8 o'clock at night, it shuts off. After 30 minutes, I, the parent, have to put a password in to reactivate it, to allow it to go back on. These are all common features that people should not only be aware of, but utilizing. And I just want to add one more thought, that we're mechanech our children also, not just with our actions, but with our language. The way that we speak about what we're doing on our tablets, our devices, the way that we ask them about what they're doing. This is so many years ago. It was my oldest child. It was close to 30 years ago. I was speaking to a friend who was very, very thoughtful and reflective. That might have been, as you said, the Pac-Man era, the Game Boy era, or something like that. And I remember that we were using CDs in computers for our kids to learn basic ABCs and purely educational things. And it was a way that we were, encouraging them to learn more on their own for enrichment. And one of my friends said that she developed a language with her child. Whenever he was on the computer, she would say to him, Tani, is what you're doing now mindful or mindless? And this was a 4-year-old boy who would be able to respond to that question, and ultimately grew up to an amazing young man who asks himself that question about the things that he's doing. And we would often discuss between ourselves that if it's mindless, that's okay. We all need that time in the day where we do things that are mindless. But when I've asked you and leaned over your shoulder, not just to look at the content, but to see, because as my husband said, the computer's in a public area, etc., but to just a little check-in. Have you been doing something mindless for 2 hours? When a child has to articulate back that it's mindless and I'm still doing something mindless, you'll see an amazing thing on their own. They start to separate from it because the recognition that, yes, I needed a little space, I needed a little relaxation, but gosh, I've been playing solitaire and worse, or whatever it might be, Candy Crush or Fortnite, for hours and hours. That's ha'emidu. That's chinuch. That's giving them that self-awareness and that recognition of self-regulating themselves, which, as my husband said, is so important. It's here. And not only is it here, but right now we need it. We need it to connect our children and our students to learning in a meaningful way. And therefore, it's our obligation to give them those self-regulatory skills of language, for example, like mindful and mindless.
Rav Yisroel, Rabbi Elisheva, both principals of their respective schools, high schools, thank you very much for your time. It's an honor to speak to you.
Thank you.
It's an honor for us. It's an honor for us. You should continue with all your great work at teaching Klal Yisrael and bringing Achdus in Klal Yisrael. We appreciate we know of your work very well, and we wish you continued Hatzlacha with all your work.
Amen. Thank you.
כאיש אחד, אוי אוי בלב אחד, Vayichan sham